Okay, guys, it's right around 7:45 a.m. on Thursday, March 7th, 2024. I'm down here having a cup of coffee, and I hope it doesn't spill. And sort of, once again, smelling some very strange smells down here that I should never smell in not just this room, but anywhere on this property, because it is a fully fenced in and gated property where nobody should be able to access any part of these premises. But apparently they are, because there is one access point for much of this house that is located on the neighbor's property. Paradoxically, the neighbors to the west, they're a younger couple that have some behaviorally challenged children that are constantly screaming and shouting and screaming and shouting, almost like they're having epileptic fits or something. So these people don't seem to work. They're always home. The kids are always screaming and shouting in the front yard or in the backyard, even in the middle of the day. I mean, I'm not here all the time. I haven't been here in a year and a half. So for the last year and a half, I have not traveled out here and visited my family on this property. So I'm not sure what goes on the rest of the time that I'm not here. But all I know is that while I've been here for the last 2 weeks now, it's exactly 2 weeks that I arrived, the people next door, the younger couple, they're always home. But they have like one of the biggest houses on the street. It's like twice the size of this house. And this house is small in comparison, but it's not small in general. They have this giant house and they don't work. That's weird. They also don't speak English very well. Not that I have a problem with that, but it starts raising concerns about like, well, do they have connections to maybe organized crime, right? I mean, I used to watch Real Housewives of New Jersey, and none of those husbands on the Real Housewives of New Jersey ever seemed to have a job, but they worked in, like they had like car repair garages, right? They had car repair garages, but then they lived in these like billion-dollar mansions, and you're like, where does their money come from? Maybe they have connections to the Italian mob, right? I don't like to typecast, but all of the characters on the Real Housewives of New Jersey are Italian. And, New Jersey is kind of a big mob state, right? I'm not being racist. I have friends who are Italian, but it's just a fact. Some people who are Italian have connections to the Italian mafia. My mom's neighbors are from Mexico, and they have one of the biggest houses on the street. It's huge, but they're always home. Maybe they work from home, right? They could do that. Sure. But working from home, unless you're running, Sotheby's or something, or Chase or Bank of America, will not get you enough income to afford $1 million house. The house next door must be $1 million, because this one, which is half the size, is in that range. So what are they doing staying home all day? Anyway, I'm just speculating, but they seem to be sort of part of an activist group. Let's put it that way. 5 years ago, because I live in Boston, I continue to live in Boston in the same building that I've lived in since July of 2011. That's when I moved in. An officer, actually 2 officers from the Boston Police Department, told me there's an activist group living in my building that don't want me to live there. And they both told me that, both officers told me that they would start issuing citations to residents of that building who belong to this activist group, who refused to let me in the front door, because there'd be large groups of screaming, shouting residents when I would get home from work at 9:30 p.m., which is a weird time for people to be loitering outside in the doorways when it's cold outside and it's dark and it's 9:30 p.m. There'd be large groups of residents just throwing stuff at me, shouting at me, calling me names. And then the police would have to come because I couldn't access the front door safely. And these officers told me, they're like, yeah, this is an activist group. Your landlord is sponsoring them. Apparently the landlord is part of that group. And they don't want you to live here. This was like 5 years ago in 2018. And I didn't believe them at the time. I'm like, well, why would anybody not want me to live there? I don't even talk to anyone. I just go to work and I mind my own business, and I come home late at night and I don't interact with anyone. Well, that's their problem. They think I'm supposed to be providing them with sexual favors because there's a large population of sex offenders in that building. And they have a problem with the fact that I ignore them and go about my own business and don't want to interact with them. That's why they harass me. I am one of the only white females, if not the only white female, who lives in that building. I always thought that that was fine. I'm like, well, I'm not a racist. I'll just live here, right? I mean, if people leave me alone, I'm fine. But they refuse to leave me alone. That's the problem. One of these people, apparently the main activist, if you want to call them that, it's also a sex offender, a cyber criminal, and a psychopath named Jasmine Irizarry. She seems to travel a lot. Irizarry, I know for a fact, has traveled to New Haven, Connecticut when I've gone there to visit my dad. And there's very obvious signs of what she does when she's down there. She breaks and enters into my dad's house, contaminates the food. That happened the last time I was down there, right? And she does this in my apartment in Boston as well. Irizarry appears to be a trained career criminal who is quite good at picking locks and accessing the infrastructure of various types of buildings. She accesses the infrastructure to my own unit in Boston and seems to be able to tamper with the tap water of my sink because the water from that sink was perfectly safe to use for about 9 years. And then after a lot of construction work was being done from her bathroom against the pipes to my kitchen tap in 2019, because the Greenville group placed this career criminal in the unit directly next to mine, how convenient. That's when the water from that tap started stinking, smelling absolutely disgusting, and making me really sick. And that's been happening ever since. Here at my mom's, I keep smelling marijuana, intense amounts of marijuana and burning rubber. Those are the two smells, signature smells, that Irizarry has been blowing into my bathroom and into my residential unit in Boston since she was placed in Unit 78 directly next door to mine in 2013. She likes to smoke something that smells like burning rubber. I can only assume that it's crack or something like that. And then she smokes a ton of marijuana. It's a very specific type of marijuana, and you can smell it right away. I don't smoke. I have a very strong sense of smell. I can smell odors from across the street, basically. I have a strong sense of smell. Maybe I'm like part German Shepherd or something. That would make sense given my German last name. But anyway, she's out here. I've figured this out. I mean, there's no way that this person cannot be out here. And because she's Mexican, Irizarry is Mexican. The neighbors next door are Mexican, and the access point, the only access point to this property, to my mom's house, is on their property. Then, why wouldn't Irizarry be smoking marijuana in the crawl space of this house? It's pretty obvious. You can see it from the street. There's a big hole on the side of the property. And it's like, who wouldn't want to go under there, right? Like my 12-year-old niece last year, when I was out here a year and a half ago, the neighbors on the other side, the elderly couple behind this house, they have a giant opening on the side of their house. And my niece goes, we should crawl under there and start smacking the floor of their house, right? Because everybody knows that's the crawl space. It's not closed. Any homeless person can crawl under there and set up shop. There's probably about 3 feet of space. It's not comfortable, but if you've got the right equipment, you've got a jacket and waterproof bags or whatever, you can maybe make a comfortable little corner for yourself under there. I'm only assuming. All I know is I've been smelling marijuana constantly in this room right here, which is completely sealed off from the rest of the house and also only has access to the backyard, which nobody can access because there's a 10-foot high fence all around the backyard and a locked gate. And every time I smell marijuana in this room, I actually walk into the backyard to see if it's coming from the backyard. It never is. There's never any marijuana smoke coming from the backyard. So where does the marijuana smoke come from? The other weird and creepy thing that happened this past night is that the electrical system completely went out in this room, even though it's a brand new room. It was placed on this house just a few years ago with brand new wiring, obviously. And the entire wiring and electrical system for this house was redone just before my mom moved into this house. So there should be no power outages. But not only was there a power outage in this room last night, but the power can't be restored because it's not a fuse. My niece and I checked the fuse box. We checked every single fuse. It's not a fuse. So I had to run an extension cord from the kitchen over to the router that you see right there on that couch so that we can actually have Wi-Fi in this house because the Wi-Fi is plugged into the electrical system for this add-on, which is new. The electrical wiring is new but suddenly it stopped working last night while I was smelling marijuana, intense amounts of marijuana coming from, I'm assuming, somewhere underneath my mom's house, that part of which has a 3-foot wide crawl space under it, that it can only be accessed from the Mexican neighbor's property, not from the property of the elderly couple on the other side. What I'm saying is, I don't know what the Mexican couple next door are part of in terms of activist groups or whatever, but Irizarry, the one who's been living in Unit 78 directly next to my unit in Boston since 2013 and who continues to access the now vacant premises of Unit 78 for the last year and a half, seems to have traveled here to California. And she's doing the exact same stuff out here as she did in Boston because that's her job. She's some kind of paid activist for some activist group, according to what the Boston police told me, who don't want me to live in the building in Boston. Now, I would think that they would just stick to their own stuff in Boston and not go all the way to California. But because this person is a psychopath, also according to the Boston Police Department, then she's not going to just sit around and twiddle her thumbs in Boston. She has this psychotic need to harass and stalk people. So she's going to get on an airplane with her activist funding and harass people in other states. That is what appears to be happening here. Is the Greenville group paying her? I don't know. Maybe it's another type of activist group that the Greenville group is part of. They do appear to be activist landlords because they only rent to certain groups of people. They don't rent to Asians or white people. So they seem to be an activist landlord, which is, extremely illegal. You're not supposed to discriminate against anyone as a landlord. But the Greenville group refuses to rent to white females. I'm one of them. They want me out. They're just constantly taking me to court for these ridiculous reasons, like, oh, you violated the lease by shaking out a towel in the stairwell. And then they literally take me to court for stuff like that. It's ridiculous. Or then they prevent me from being able to apply for rental funding. And then when I fall behind on the rent, they say that I owe them rent, and then they take me to court. It's a complete setup. It's just a crazy bunch of bullshit. And it's unfair and deceptive business practices, which is completely illegal. It's racial discrimination. It's gender discrimination, which is also illegal, but they're too stupid to know that. And then they hire these supposed activists to harass the shit out of me when I'm there. And this activist, because she's completely insane, literally goes to other states whenever I happen to go to these other states, because she's also a psychotic stalker, according to the Boston Police Department, right? So this activist group, whoever they are, that the Boston police told me is in my building, could be BLM. I'm only speculating here. Could be BLM. They appear to be funding this psychopath named Irizarry and allowing her to travel around and follow me where I go, because she's a psychotic stalker to begin with, and they're just using her psychosis for their own purposes. That seems to be what's happening, because here I should not be smelling intense amounts of marijuana every time I come down to this completely sealed room. Why did the electricity go out here last night? And it's not a fuse, but it's a brand new room. That kind of thing. Yeah. Okay. So you know what? I'm smelling so much marijuana right now in this sealed room with nobody around. I'm going to go outside to see if I can smell it outside. I don't know. There's absolutely no marijuana anywhere out here. It's completely fresh air, right? And I keep saying this in my building in Boston as well. Whoever keeps smoking marijuana, wherever I happen to be, it's not where you think it's coming from. So do you see this 10-foot high fence right here? See this fence? There's no way anybody can get over that unless they use a ladder and they, break their neck. They risk breaking their neck. Okay, and it goes all the way around the property. Whoops. There's no marijuana out here. The marijuana is coming from underneath the house, because that is the only place anybody can access any part of my mom's house. And it's the only part that's not gated or locked. Yeah, see, it's gated over here as well. Completely closed off. See this fence right here? These are the neighbors I'm talking about. And the access point to the property is on the other side of this fence right here. It's completely fenced off. Do you see how high that is? Nobody can get over that unless they have a ladder and they try really hard to get into this backyard. There's no marijuana out here. So whoever's smoking marijuana and filling this unit right here, this room, with marijuana right now is doing so from underneath the house. They have to be. And that, my friends, is BLM. I'm pretty sure it's a BLM activist group because they're all over the country and they do have the funds to send their activists all over the place. They don't like white people. My family is about as white as it gets. And, they have the funding to do this, and they tend to use criminals, people who are already in the criminal justice system, to do their dirty work. Jay Irizarry is a registered sex offender who's also a psychotic stalker. This is what the Boston police told me. This is not me coming up with some crazy idea. This is a matter of public record. And according to Boston police officers, she follows people around. So there we go. Oh, and also according to the Greenville group, who are the ones who told me that she, quote, targets people. That's the Greenville group themselves. So, Greenville, maybe they're part of BLM. Maybe they fund BLM. Maybe they donate. It's all a BLM related thing as far as I can tell right now.